The October 10, 2018 Prosper Portland Board of Commissioners meeting is convened. Pam, will you please call the roll?
Me? Commissioner Platt? Commissioner Gambetti?
Here.
Commissioner Moreland Capuya?
Here.
Commissioner Myers?
Here.
Chair Cruz?
Here.
I just got a message that we are going to be calling Commissioner Platt, so I'm going to have Mark here help me patch him
okay.
in. I imagine maybe we want to go ahead and start, or that's up to you. It'll take us a moment.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go ahead and start with commissioner reports then, and we'll patch them in when we can. Commissioner Gambetti?
I attended the Broadway Corridor Open House event on October 26th.
Great, thank you. Commissioner, either of you?
Oh, go ahead. You.
Commissioner Myers?
Attended the PBDG meeting, their monthly meeting that was located here in September 25th. Attended the Virtue Lab reception, September 26th, Broadway Corridor Open House. October, I attended so far this month a couple an executive board meeting and a work meeting for Broadway Corridor. And several C2, P2, the Metro's convening of the Construction Careers Pathways Project, several roundtables with that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, last Wednesday.
Okay. Great, thank you. I attended a lunch meeting with MISO and the MISO management team. That was a really great meeting on September 25th. And on September 26th, I attended the Broadway Corridor Open House gathering, which also was a great event. And then I've attended various check-ins and update meetings and things like that over the last month. Executive Director Branham.
Good afternoon, Chair Cruz and Commissioners. We are squarely in event season with lots of signature annual events having taken place this last month. Among others, I was able to attend Greater Portland Inc.'s annual Economic Summit, Latino Network's Noche Bella, Oregon Business and Industry Statesman Dinner, and the annual Pitch Black Entrepreneurial Competition hosted by Stephen Green. Prosper Portland, as was mentioned, and the Housing Bureau hosted the second Broadway Corridor Open House event on Wednesday, September 26th. You'll hear more about the feedback that we received at that open house during the presentation, but I want to note that there are a couple of upcoming information session roadshows that are taking place. So one will be held Thursday, October 11th at the North Portland Library from 3:30 to 5:45 p.m. and Friday, October 12th at the Portland Mercado from 5 to 7 p.m. I want to appreciate all of the Prosper Portland staff who volunteered and who participated in making these really successful open houses, in particular June Reyes and Sarah Harpole. I want to appreciate their leadership on this and throughout the project. The Go Green Conference for Business and Government is happening today, October 10th. This creates an opportunity for collaboration with regional innovators and sustainability champions. I want to acknowledge Pam Neal, who is our point on the Clean Cities cluster, for her leadership and ongoing involvement in this important conference. And speaking of resilience, Prosper Portland has closed the first Property Fit Oregon project using the never before used in Oregon commercial property assessed clean energy financing structure, which was authorized by the state legislature in 2015. The $3.5 million transaction will help finance the revitalization of the historic 1911 Vivian Apartments, which is a 2,200 square foot building off Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, into a first of its kind social hotel. Property Fit is a partnership between Prosper Portland, Multnomah County, and Energy Trust of Oregon to bring the CPACE program to the Multnomah County market and support carbon reduction, water conservation, seismic resiliency, and economic development goals. I want to acknowledge Shelley Hack and Amy Nagy for their incredible work on this program and encourage anyone who's interested to let us know. This is a really great tool for the kinds of improvements that I mentioned. I also want to congratulate Sue Ball for winning an Excellence in Economic Development Award for Entrepreneurship from the International Economic Development Council. She received the award on October 2nd, and it's for her work with local athletic and outdoor entrepreneurs in the industry peer-to-peer program. So great work to Sue. Looking forward, Prosper Portland will participate in the Elevate Inclusion Summit happening next Friday, October 12th. We're excited to see this event take place and are really excited that since Prosper Portland, in partnership with Multnomah County and Business Oregon, founded the Inclusive Startup Fund in late 2015, that this initiative has truly grown and flourished in such a visible and successful way. So thanks to Nitin Rai with Elevate Capital for his leadership and vision, and thanks to Tori Campbell and Catherine Kroniak for their work in support of this event. You can find out more about the event at elevate.vc. The New Leaf Project, which is Prosper Portland's partner on our cannabis business development program, is accepting applications for a grant program designed specifically to support to help cannabis businesses owned by people of color to achieve greater success. You can find out more information on the grant program, which closes Friday, October 19th at nuleafproject.org. Also want to remind people that the third edition of My People's Market is happening Friday, November 9th. It will be held at the Customs Block, which is at Southeast 10th and Main Street in the Central East Side from 5 to 10 p.m. The market brings together multicultural vendors and performing artists. It's a family-friendly event, and it will offer live music, foods, drinks, and some good pre-holiday season shopping opportunities. For more information, you can go to mypeoplesmarket.com. And finally, this year's Community Livability Grant application process is open. We are seeking proposals from community-based organizations for projects that foster vibrant and inclusive neighborhoods and improve the prosperity of area residents and businesses. Funds are available for permanent capital improvements and will be available, the program will be open until Friday, November 16th. You can find out more on our website, prosperportland.us/CLG. Last but not least, I'd like to introduce a new staff person, Thea Munchel, who comes to us from Cincinnati, Ohio. She is now our third staff member from Cincinnati, so we're really big in Cincinnati. She's been working in real estate planning and community development for the last 15 years. She was the director of real estate and economic development for the Walnut Hills Redevelopment Foundation. She led public-private partnerships in collaboration with local residents, developers, businesses, and public officials to develop community-based projects and plans. Prior to that, she was a project manager with Over the Rhine Community Housing, overseeing development and construction projects and putting together different funding and financing schemes, including using new market tax credits and low-income housing tax credits. In addition to this expertise, Thea enjoys riding bikes and weaving on her free time and is really a new entrant to Portland, having been here for just a matter of weeks. So we are looking forward to helping her be comfortable in the city and really excited to have her in this new role.
Welcome to Portland and welcome to Prosper Portland.
Chair Cruz, if I may interrupt, we can patch Commissioner Platt in now.
Great.
Thank you.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm
You're going to put them on?
going to put you on hold. Okay. Commissioner Platt?
Yes, hello.
Oh, thank you. You are now in the room.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. So our next item is approval of the minutes for September 12, 2018. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes? Please.
I move to approve the minutes.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any comments or changes to the minutes? No? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Okay. Do we have any public comment? No. All right. So the next item is an information item. This is an update on the Broadway Corridor Master Planning interim use and site demolition project. And Sarah Harpole, Amy Adams, Myra Areola from Prosper Portland are all going to join us. Nolan Linhart was to be here, but he's ill, so Julie Bronder will join us instead. Welcome. Glad you could make it. And Mark Falcone from Continuing Partners. Thank you for coming all the way out from Denver.
Good
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Chair Cruz, Executive Director Branham. We're excited to be here today. We're going to kind of take a unique approach to this briefing, and we would like to have kind of more of an interactive work session today to seek input from the board on some key questions on a number of components of the Broadway Corridor project. I'm going to do brief introductions, and we'll kick off. So my name is Sarah Harple. I'm a project manager in the Development Investment Department of Prosper Portland.
I'm Julie Bronder. I'm an architect and project manager with Zimmer Gunzel Frasca here in Portland.
Frank Cannon, Development Director with Continuum Partners. My partner, Mark, is not able to be here today, but I'm stepping in
Sorry,
for
I
him.
apologize.
That's okay. Thank you.
Mayra Rola, Director of Social Equity, Policy and Communications at Prosper Portland.
Charles Adrian, Business and Industry Manager with Prosper Portland.
Amy Edwards, Manager of the Asset and Investment Team at Prosper Portland.
So here's a brief overview of today's agenda. I will be kicking off with an update on kind of where we're at in the project overall, our project process and schedule and timeline. Myra will be discussing our community engagement efforts and the engagement of our steering committee. Julie will be presenting our preliminary concepts that we have unveiled in September, and Frank will be also providing perspective from Continuum on those concepts and their role in the project. Troll will be speaking to some initial thinking around an anchor employer recruitment strategy for the project. And then Amy will be discussing some of our considerations for demolition of the existing building and interim use between now and when development will commence. And then I'll close with some next steps and a high-level overview of our financial analysis to date. As I mentioned, we do want to have an interactive session, so please feel free to ask questions along the way. We have some key questions that we'll be posing also kind of through our chapters of our presentation, but we welcome any input along the way. First, to kick us off, in green, you see the Broadway Corridor study area. Most of the parcels are controlled by Prosper Portland. We own the post office property, as you know, in partnership with the Portland Housing Bureau. I do want to specifically call out the distinction between the broader Broadway Corridor study area we see in green and the post office site itself, where there is a specific requirement for a master plan consistent with the Central City master plan requirements. And so we will have a submittal package to the Design Commission at the end of our process that is specific to that parcel only moving forward as well. So we have been underway on this phase of the project since about May 2017 when we kicked off work with our steering committee. We spent the first year working with them to dig into their input on the project vision and the guiding principles and the project goals that informed our solicitation for a development partner. We then issued that solicitation, which resulted in the selection of Continuum Partners as our development advisor for the project. We were last before you in April of 2018 for approval of two significant milestones, which was the selection of Continuum as well as the approval of the contract we have with ZGF to support us in our development planning work. Since those two approvals, we have been able to kick off our development planning efforts beginning in June of this year. Our early work is to continue working with the steering committee and soliciting public input that has informed the preliminary concepts we'll be discussing today. Throughout this process, we were being very mindful of kind of this framework, which we'll be coming back to frequently in our discussions, of the need for an intentional iterative process to look at balancing our priorities for community benefits, the urban development design and program, and having a financially viable development project. We started our work leading with the public benefit conversation and what we wanted this place to be and what it could deliver for the city and the broader region. And we will now see our work is transitioning into how that manifests itself in a program and a vision for the site. As I mentioned, we unveiled the preliminary development concepts in September at our open house, and we're in the process of collecting feedback through online forums, the pop-up events that Kimberly mentioned, and others to inform the refinement of those concepts, which is now just kicking off as well. And then in beginning of next year, you will see the kind of narrowing down to a preferred concept and estimating about 4 months detailing that preferred concept in more detail before we go into our master plan approval process and negotiation of the project-related agreements. As I mentioned throughout this process, we're also being mindful of what public benefits this project can deliver, and so that can manifest in multiple ways, whether it's employment opportunities, affordable housing, a mix of housing within the site, public infrastructure, streets, open space, contracting and wealth creation opportunities, sustainable development are priorities that we are hearing. This shows the overall timeline for many of the key aspects of the project. You can see in the dashed orange of where we are today. The post office transitioned their processing and distribution functions to the Colwood property in June of this year. They are closing out the kind of removal of any remaining equipment and anticipate vacating that portion of their operations from the site at the end of this year. We do have an obligation for the retaining or relocating their retail functions, so buying stamps, getting your passport, mailboxes, and Amy will discuss those requirements and our work there. You do see in yellow kind of, in some ways, the critical path components of this project, and so the relocation of that retail component as it relates to our ability to demolish the building, and our interest in looking at interim activation opportunities during that same time. And then as well as the relationship between our development planning work, which is underway, and then our ability to negotiate our property transaction agreements and our community benefits agreements that would allow for a first phase of development to commence. We anticipate that first land transaction will provide us the resources to repay the line of credit, which is due June of 2022. Are there any questions kind of overall process before I hand it over to Myra?
Thank you. I will be providing an update on the engagement efforts for the corridor, and just as a reminder. Thank you. Can you hear me better? Great, thank you. One of the things that Prosper Portland did in very early stages that has been key and very critical to how we approach the engagement and inclusion of this work is having a racial equity impact assessment very early on in the stage. This tool has influenced heavily how we think about the work and is constantly influencing how we approaching the work. So this tool was developed by Risk Forward, which is the Center for Racial Justice Innovation, and is really used to minimize unanticipated adverse impacts in racial and ethnic groups. So it's a tool that really helps put people first and how we think and develop projects. Some of the findings of that came out of this assessment was that we really needed to engage stakeholders differently, that we needed to check assumptions throughout the project, and we're still doing it up to today. We have been able to pause in different times just to kind of check if this is the best way, the best strategy to pursue a certain effort or a conversation, that we need to have equity conversations throughout the process, that we need to enlist partners that have equity goals and priorities such as ours, from developers to contractors to consultants, anybody that comes in touch with the work, we should be in alignment with those priorities, that we needed to structure financial deals with equity goals in mind, and really emphasize the need to have a long-term perspective on this project. With any urban development, there are generational impacts that occur, so how can we minimize damage primarily in communities of color and communities that have not been benefiting from urban development projects in the past. So with that as a frame, there are some, sorry, there you go. So the next slide. This really showcases what's similar and what changed because of these findings, or because Prosper Portland really making us a claim that we want to do things differently this time. So in past projects, there's similarities around permitting processes. We've had outreach and engagement efforts in the past, and as we all know, real estate and financial markets really heavily influence the outcome of a project. So those are things that we sometimes don't have control over, or are things that we just have to abide to based on different policies. What has been different for this, from other projects that Prosper Portland has engaged with, is that this is a publicly held large-scale development parcel, that we have a lot of potential and opportunity to find ways to generate revenue so we can benefit other areas of the city, particularly East Portland, that we needed to have broader engagement early on to help define the project. As you know, the steering committee has been playing a critical role advising Prosper Portland about the project and the framework and the goals and equity goals and priorities. And that we needed to have a community benefits agreement on top of existing policies and procedures that we have as an agency, and that we needed to really seek out input from community organizations and support organizations financially that participate in the process. So with all of this said, sorry. So, I don't know, it's jumping. Michael. There you go. There have been several, I don't know what's happening. Okay. So the guiding principles that the steering, I'm sorry, I'm just. So who has been shaping the project so far? Okay, we have had several ongoing ways to gather input based on different roles that different community stakeholders play. So from the public, we've held open houses, we've had online and field surveys, we have community stakeholder interviews, we've had plenty of opportunities for our community at large to provide input. We also have a steering committee, which role is to advise Prosper Portland in the master planning of the project. We have a developer, Continuum, who's sitting here with us. We have a consultant team who's also represented today, and we also have steering bureaus that are engaging in the development of this project. So all this input really is going to come or has been coming directly to the executive committee, which is comprised of Prosper Portland's and Portland Housing Bureau's executive directors, and the decision makers of the project really align in the different parts of the work. So we have City Council, Design Commission, the Prosper Portland Board, Portland Housing Advisory Commission, and lastly, the Planning and Sustainability Commission. So we have a lot of different decision-making points and a lot of areas for input and opportunities for different stakeholders to really help influence and how this project is shaped and developed. Wish me luck. There you go. So roles and responsibilities. Right now, we are in the development planning process. So Prosper Portland is the lead, leading the process to complete the master plan. The steering committee is playing an advisory role. CGF is a consultant to Prosper Portland during this portion of the project. Continuum is also an advisor, and we have other partners that are also playing an advisory role. And then throughout the different stages of the process, you can say you will find who plays what role, and that's going to depend that's going to be dependent on where we are in the development. As you can see, this is the 35 members that comprise the steering committee. There's a very wide range of representations of backgrounds, skills, experiences, cultural organizations, community groups that are providing input to our process on a monthly basis. And they also participate in different other opportunities like open houses to just bring other representatives as well. So far, in recent months, this is where we've been gathering input. We've had our monthly steering committee meetings. We've had a set of stakeholder interviews with a lot of the representatives that you see listed there. There are community organizations, arts, organizations that focus on houselessness, Opal Environmental, AARP, and other very critical points of view. We've also participated in Sunday Parkways. We've made presentations at the Public Partners Technical Team. We've held 2 open houses with really great participation and great input. And then we've made a couple presentations to the Design Commission. So this is just a summary of the high-level feedback we've received so far, and this is in alignment with the goals of the project that were for which the steering committee played a critical role in helping develop. When it comes to accountability, One of the main things that has been, rising to the top is that we need to establish a mission-driven management organization and embrace flexibility and experimentation throughout the project. About connection, that we need to have a link to the green loop, and then look at streets and paths as a way for community to gather, really looking at the personality and the vibrancy of the area. And that we need to create distinctive spaces for breaking the Portland grid. How do we create a distinct personality, a distinct kind of focus group of the site that really helps kind of reshape how this area is seen? Around equity, that we need to have or highlight the importance of civic spaces that are inviting and welcoming for diverse communities. We really want to enhance and increase the use of the space and the livability of the area by communities that have been experiencing gentrification or having to move further and further away. So how do we create those spaces that are inviting and welcoming and inclusive for people to use? We need to foster a retail mix that reflects the range of outcomes and household types, balance the need from people experiencing houselessness and other users of the area, and have alternative security strategies to support vulnerable communities. Around prosperity, that is important to have spaces and support entrepreneurs and small business owners and have opportunities for workforce development, support minority-owned and women-owned small businesses and contractors, and have opportunities to provide job training and employment opportunities. Around resiliency, to provide community-based programs and have green infrastructure that it's interactive and also provides benefits for the human well-being, and that we need a sustainable approach to energy and waste. Yes.
Can you go back to the prior slide?
Sure.
Please. So these are all wonderful goals and conversations. I'm curious, some of them seem to be competing with one another. So balance the needs of people experiencing homelessness, and then I'm curious to know what some of the discussions have been with the 35 members on that table about how to move towards achieving these goals, right? So you want space for new folks, but we still don't have enough space for folks who've been here. We want to try to resolve the houselessness issue, provide alternative security strategies, and then to create spaces for gathering and lingering, which when some people see that, they're like, well, that's in direct sort of competition to, with creating secure, safe spaces. So I'm just curious as to what some of the conversations have been around these things.
I can provide also Sarah and Julie, feel free to add or, I think that this really has to be with having an inclusive space. It has to do with having an inclusive space. So how do we recognize the needs of the site, of the area? We're in downtown Portland. There's a lot of needs and programs that are servicing certain parts of the community. So how do we create a space in which, people have access to resources, in which they feel welcome and supported, while at the same time we have opportunities for civic and community-driven gatherings and spaces. So that so it's not necessarily how do we create a space in which people that are experiencing houselessness now they're not welcome and have to go to a different part, but how do we support the needs of that community while we invite others to join and kind of create a space that feels safe for everybody that wants to use it. And I don't know, Julie or Sarah, if you have anything else from the open houses.
I'm going to maybe weigh into that one.
1 second before, as a way of follow-up, those all, again, that makes sense to me. I'm wondering if there are specific things that you all have been able to, like concrete things that you've been able to discuss with that group about what that looks like. That's ideal. That's a utopian environment, but are there some structural things that the group, that's the developers, have been able to take those thoughts and ideas and actually execute them with some actionable, thoughtful, I'm curious.
So the Project for Public Spaces was the group, which is a subcontractor of ZGF, put this information together. And it was a consolidation of information that came through the steering committee. So people were given maps and asked questions like, what's a good public space? What feels good to you? And then they kind of looked at those practices and came up with a series of recommendations. I think these are related in that the first one of having a district management organization and having curated space really matters. So the Pioneer Square is seen as an example of a place that feels really welcoming and inclusive, and it's really highly programmed, and there's a full-time management organization. So I think Project for Public Spaces has used that as a best practice in terms of having places that are opening and welcoming and also active. And so it's just a more, it's just a different way of communicating that it is inclusive and also not having underutilized public spaces.
And I appreciate that. While Pioneer Square is considered open, I guess the question of inclusive space and safe for everyone, that's questionable. But I can see how that would be motivation. And then I have sort of another question. So thank you, and then maybe you can respond as well. But I'm also curious, we had talked, I know, about sort of these opportunities for development that we wanted to see more people of color being able to not just be subcontractors, but to actually be contractors. And I just want to put that out there in the space. We went through the timeline, and I'm consistently still concerned about it, right? If we really want to contribute to decreasing that wealth gap, we've got to get people of color opportunities to be in the driver's seat. And I'm not appreciating that right now with this particular project, and so I want to put it out there. And if there's something I'm missing, I'd like you to maybe help me.
One of the aspects you'll see a little bit coming up pretty quickly in the presentation is some of these items, as well as the comment around opportunities for wealth creation and involvement of developers of color. Different concepts are kind of testing different aspects of that to get feedback of what seems to be working and not working. You'll see in a moment that, as an example, there's a different kind of granularity potential of different development concepts, which might better lend themselves to those opportunities for multiple local developers to participate more easily than another concept. So that's the type of feedback that we are testing and trying to get back, similar to kind of the open space and what might feel welcoming and comfortable. To one person, they may react in one way to concept and in a different way to a different concept and gain that feedback of what is starting to resonate. And then other conversations will be deferred more to an operations conversation or in the community benefits conversation.
And just to close the community engagement portion of the presentation around vibrancy, some of the things that have been raised as priorities are having a variety of gathering spaces, programming that emphasizes culture and commerce, to what Kimberly alluded earlier, and Commissioner Morland-Capuya, prioritize and embed arts, and have really well-used spaces that are really able to be activated throughout the year. So that is what we've been hearing so far, and then we'll provide another update in the near future. So thank you.
So I know some of you have been to the open houses and other events and have seen some of this information. So I'm going to take sort of a lighter overview approach to it, and then trust that you'll ask me questions if I miss something that you're interested in. Okay? All right, so we have completed the top red bar, which was coming up with what we thought should be involved in this site, and obtaining a lot of different advice and input from different groups. We came out of that with 3 concepts that aren't necessarily fully independent, but they identify pieces and parts and ideas that can be applied towards some of our individual goals and put them in a container for us to evaluate. So we are currently in that first box, yellow, phase C1. And you can see from where we just came, we have a relatively short list of things we were trying to evaluate. We are now getting into a much higher level of detail. So things like parking and multimodal access. Let's see, phasing, the impact of phasing, for example, and how all of those aspects may impact one design or another to make it maybe better performing, maybe I've identified that that doesn't work as well in that particular concept. So as the baseline, we're going back to the 2015 framework plan. And in that plan, we've identified some baseline areas that apply to streets or parks or open space, different kinds of land use. And we've generally kind of decided what the layout of it should be as far as how it interfaces with its adjacent neighborhoods. So when we have questions or question ourselves about something, this is where we go back to track 2, since it's where we started. Oh, I see why that happens, Myra. So we've been testing these concepts, and it is a difficult thing to do in many aspects. There is testing that is of policy, there is testing that is of program, there is testing that is of design. So there's all these different lenses that we're looking at these concepts through, and meanwhile, we're soliciting input from all these parties around us and how they interpret that same information. We do find that there is often two sides to the coin. An idea may be very palatable to one group and not so much to another. So what we are finding is that generally we've all agreed, and this is not just us designers, but what the composite of all the input so far, that we consistently want this project to involve commercial affordability, housing affordability, place management, accessibility, and retain the existing anchors. What is different in these concepts that we are studying are the parcel layout. You'll see that in a bit, that there's different philosophies about how that parcel size or layout might impact different aspects of the effectiveness. Similarly, the road network, how the open spaces are laid out, if they were contiguous or separated. Celebrating Union Station as a place, or whether it's a neighbor, whether it's a center or a neighbor, for instance. And then the arts and culture element, and the green loop, which I think you're familiar with the green loop. This is a new idea, so there is not really something set in place yet. So we would be one part of a continuum of that green loop, and we're assessing what that should be.
Can I just ask you real quick, the
Yes.
existing anchors, what are you referring to there? The
Exist-
last-
I think it's saying that we don't want to lose those anchors that are nearby. So whether those are housing, whether those are business, transit, whatever, we want to make sure that we're respecting that they're there already, and we want to help them to stay and include their input in what we're doing. Okay. So here's an example of one of those things that we might test. Between the schemes, we took a look at what the parcel size might mean. So if we continue sort of the Portland 200 by 200 foot grid.
Real quick, can you clarify who the anchors are that you're specifically talking about, like Greyhound, Union Station, others that you're talking about?
Sure, let me think for a second.
Sarah's got it.
Sorry, Sarah's got it.
We have, within the study area, we have two significantly historic buildings, Union Station and the Pacific Northwest College of Art. And so how the character of those two kind of anchor institutions lend itself to the space. And then the transportation network is another significant component. So whether it's the bus mall, Greyhound's functionality, the streetcar adjacent, and then we have a number of affordable housing developments that are around the periphery of the study area as well.
Thanks, Sarah. No, that's great. So here's an example of something that we might test. The parcel size might be the continuation of the 200 by 200 Portland block. It might be larger parcels and smaller parcels. It may be irregular parcels, for example. And then how might the green loop interface with those different elements? Is there a reason why a combination of one or the other might be more successful? And again, the permeability of the site. So we want to have transportation, bicycles, pedestrians, all the different kinds of network through the site. We want to make sure that we test those opportunities to see whether perhaps nature, which has the least of the multimodal penetration with vehicles, offers things that are advantageous or maybe things we didn't initially think of that would be disadvantageous in that scheme. So the name of the first scheme is Play. That is a scheme that is the closest to the framework plan as so far as the ways that it's organized. It has a central open space. It has a pedestrian and vehicular pathway that goes east-west across the site. It connects the bridge through an elevated structure, and it connects to PNCA and the park blocks through additional public open space. So this is in plan view, that same information. And you can see things like, for instance, at Union Station, where we're looking at different opportunities in the different layouts to evaluate whether that's a real focal point and center, whether it's an integrated part of the neighborhood, whether it's part of it in some other way. Nature, the key themes here, again, were to make things less orchestrated, a little more flowing, and to bring all the benefits of nature into the city. It could be water, trees, plazas, events. We want to also connect to the river, and it is an opportunity with the more regular-sized parcels to make some more iconic architecture, for example. In this view, you can see more the opportunity it provides to do things a little bit less standard, less organized. And the discovery theme is sticking more to the grid of Portland as far as the parcel sizes, using the opportunity to divide up the space into smaller bites and to make sort of found opportunities. Maybe you have little plazas with art or something like that as opposed to a big field. This one also has much more connectivity for multimodal access across the site. And you can see that in this one we were exploring and obtaining feedback, for instance, of really let's make the Union Station something. This is a center of this new area. All right, so it's time for some feedback. Questions or discussion about what you're seeing?
I have lots of
Question
questions,
from
but
the phone.
I'm wondering what kind of,
So in each of these different conceptual renderings, are we looking at roughly the same square footage in terms of the built space?
We are. We're staying with the framework plan as a method of trying to keep the variables to a more definitive number, and by utilizing the principles of the framework plan as far as the square footage and the division based on use, such as office or housing.
Great, thank you.
I was just wondering if you want to hear from us before or after, are we going to hear what kind of feedback you've gotten so far?
Well, I didn't do a good job of that then. Yes, I would love to tell you about some of the feedback that we've received. We've received quite a bit of feedback about the green loop, how that might work, whether that should be independent or really a celebrated element of the property, and again, whether it is connected more to the bridge and viaduct systems or whether maybe you were able to take advantage of property that's already there, where you see that little parcel, the triangular parcel on the left. And it gives the opportunity to not have to build so much and get that green loop in place perhaps earlier. We've received, I'm going to see, is there a better one that has the 3? It's probably not, right? That's the one with the 3. We've received feedback from folks that said that they thought that the nature scheme was super awesome because it, you could imagine them running through there and picnicking through there and that sort of thing. And at the same time received feedback that to others it seemed a little scary because maybe it would be kind of shaded under all of those trees. And, what could be hiding in the shadows, or maybe it's just not as where they're coming from and what they're used to, something that feels as comfortable as others might think that it is. Let me think. So, let me pull my yes.
We've a couple of areas where we've had conflicting feedback that we're looking to resolve. We've had a lot of support for active recreation uses within the site. We've also heard people not wanting to live next to that active recreation use. And so where might that be best placed, and what might that function be? Is it really just a flexible space that can be multi-purposed? Is it a running trail? Is it fixed exercise equipment for the residents around the area? So that's kind of a point we're looking to resolve. The safety of the public space has been a significant conversation as well. There was also mixed input on within the Discover concept of the kind of the cultural alleys and the vibrancy of retail across all 3 concepts. And so really, where do you have a concentration of active space and the vibrancy and success of retail across the concepts? There's some concern that it could potentially not be as successful in those areas where you have less of a street network, or for example, on nature, kind of where's your front door versus your back door. And then also the flexibility of the open space within Discovery versus, say, Play are some other points.
It just feels busy. It feels like there's a lot of things happening at once, and I'm wondering, like I was thinking about, I'm trying to think on the South Waterfront, there's a huge, beautiful building that Frank Taylor at the time had redone to be this sort of fancy restaurant on the water that overlooked OMSI. And you have all those beautiful high-rise apartments over there, and there was this thought that people were going to go eat there. They didn't, right? And so the business, after putting millions of dollars into it, essentially collapsed, maybe for other reasons as well, but it just wasn't being patronized quite enough. And so, I mean, love the idea of trying to create these small communities where everything you need is in one place. But there are a number of, and we can't just think within sort of the square footage of this particular project, but there's so many other wonderful things around it. And how do we do this work, which I think it's wonderful work, and be mindful of the fact that we also are trying to support small businesses in Portland in general, not just in the Broadway corridor. So how do we not rob Peter to pay Paul, or rob Mary to pay Margie? I don't know, let's use it. So I'm just, again, just putting out there, not necessarily asking for an answer, but just recognizing that this is not the first time that these types of developments have taken place, and just wanting to kind of be thoughtful about, in terms of retail, what goes in there so that it's not necessarily competing with other, businesses on the outside of it, and to ensure that whoever gets in that space in terms of retail will actually be successful.
I had some of the same thoughts. I appreciate that there's so much information you're trying to convey. What's missing is what the context is and how you're connecting to the existing network. So, like the retail was the question I had too. And are there any requirements for retail going to be dictated through the master plan, or does city zoning?
The presence of active ground floor uses will be, whether it's specifically retail, is not.
Through the master plan, you'll be able to.
We need to identify where those locations are.
Because again, I mean, setting that up for success is going to be critical. So, and I think South Waterfront, I mean, it's more isolated, but some of the same issues, right? If you disconnect it, you've got a lot of strong retail in that area that you kind of want to feed off of, and really want to be thoughtful about how to connect that and give people a reason to keep coming through to this district. Or if it's not retail, that's fine too, but don't plan to have retail without having set it up for success, right? So I think that's one component that
Yeah, one of the things that I appreciate that is in, I think, maybe it's Discovery, is the idea of having a main street. So there's been conversation about the fact that within the Pearl District, there's really no differentiated retail, and so it's challenging because you don't have sort of a main street. And so thinking about, in fact, creating a main street along Johnson here and putting the bulk of the retail there so that you would have that. But I think I think that's, I'm writing these notes because we'll follow back up on this one just to make sure that we can discuss the context and think about that. And then think about what kinds of other types of active uses would be better placed for less trafficked areas. Right. Childcare on the ground floor is always something that we hear about. That's a high need. It doesn't necessarily need to be on a high pedestrian zone. It's definitely an active first floor use. We don't have enough in this area. So that's an example of the kind of thing that I think we can do a study about.
The other not so sexy topic is parking. And the idea that form follows parking is the idea that it's all going to be structured or that it's all underground, or and how do these different scenarios, do you think, impact parking demand? I would think that the play scenario could potentially have a much bigger.
Interesting.
So we have concepts that have looked at, or we have images that have looked at where parking, loading, and access could occur and where we might have opportunities for kind of consolidating district parking that could serve the broader development. It is a conversation we're continuing to have with the Bureau of Transportation of really where is the back door within these developments, as well as looking at phasing consideration, both for the retail and the conversation we're just having, but also for parking, and how can you phase that development. One opportunity we do have is there is an existing parking structure on this site. It's about 400 spaces, and we could potentially use that to support a first phase of development, and then take that down as a second phase of development when potentially parking demands have changed over time. The framework plan did assume that all parking was in structure above grade. We have the opportunity with the Broadway Bridge viaducts raising to have kind of some space that feels like it's kind of tucked under, but still being above grade. That'll be a conversation I know the Design Commission will also want to weigh in on, but that assumption was made both because of the significant development density and FAR and height that we have on the site, as well as the expense of digging down, both due to environmental, but also because of the location of the water table.
So if that's the case, I mean, I would think the nature would be really, really hard to park if you're parking that in structures, no?
Right.
I mean, the size of some of these
But even,
parcels.
I agree, even beyond that, in some of the areas, again, I'm just thinking about Northwest. I'm selfishly, a doctor and get paged, and I'm trying to get places, and there's just a lot going on. The streetcar's moving slow. People are not paying attention to the bike. And I bike. I take the streetcar, and you're trying to get to places. It's chaos. And so I would just want us to kind of be mindful and thoughtful about the design and who we're actually building this for. So if you have structures, I want to know like the kinds of people you have in mind. Are we talking about young millennials with no children, where you'll never need a car to get across the bridge, to get to Legacy Emmanuel Randall for emergencies, for ear infections and fevers? I'm really serious when I say this. Who are we building and designing this for? And I think we have to look beyond just gender and race, but we have to look at sort of these social constructs as well. What families are we looking? Who are we? What's the demographic? And I think we need to be kind of explicit about that, because I'm looking at all of this stuff and I'm like, nobody I know would live over in any of this design space currently. So it's, I just, again, I'm sure you have these conversations happening. I just want to put it out there. And again, I think you all have done tremendous work. It's just, I just want to put it out there to kind of think about. That's all. Thank you.
Commissioner, can you, I'll put this out, but this is really a great opportunity for us to hear what would make it a more welcoming place. We've definitely heard from steering committee members, and I think as staff, we would like to see as many 3-4 bedroom units as possible, understanding that maybe it can't all be that, but that it really is family friendly. There's been a real focus on having this be a multi-generational place, both older Portlanders and children. so of all ages. But this is, we're early enough in the phase that we can make significant changes. So if there are things that any of the commissioners feel, I'm hearing concern around the parking, the feasibility, making sure that this works in practice, not just in concept, and what the context is. If there are other things around the place that it feels like it would make it work better, it'd be a great time to, it'd be a great time to hear that. And it's not only now, right? We can continue to have the conversation, but.
I would just say that one of the things that we started this morning as an exercise within the design team was what we call a day in the life. And we do this for projects often. Who are we trying to serve and who do we want to be there? What do they need? What would they expect? What kind of facilities would they have? How would they get there? All of those sorts of things. So I think we're on the cusp of starting to consider some of the types of comments that you guys are thinking of.
It's a question from Commissioner Flanagan. So did you take inspiration from any particular project or development of this scale elsewhere in the States or even internationally? I mean, it's hard to compare apples to apples, but some it helped me to understand from a design perspective how you were approaching these three different concepts. I'm drawn, just speaking personally, more to the play aspect, because I think, again, in terms of creating spaces that would draw a wide demographic of users, play fields, open spaces, athletic fields even invite a lot of that kind of community activity at different age levels and across the social spectrum, based again upon my experience having lived in places like New York City. But I'm curious to see again what kinds of inspirations you brought to the table that helped inform these particular approaches.
What we don't have available today but could provide copies of or access to is the design team, ZGF and others within their team have very large boards that probably have 50 images of various projects that have served as kind of precedent images or examples of the space. So it wouldn't necessarily be, 3 projects that we're drawing from or 3 or 4, but kind of a collection of images that are kind of representative of the character or the activities that would happen in that space. And then very early on in the scoping effort, we did do some kind of high-level case studies of different developments, focusing on kind of how those transactions or how those opportunities were brought about, but it was more about process than it was about the design, but we do have that case study information available.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. I'd love to see some of that, just for my own edification. And then a follow-up question, this may extend into some comments from the representative from Continuum, but in visiting Denver, as my wife's family is from Colorado, I visited, of course, the Union Station project there, which I very much enjoyed. It was a very different kind of project, but it spoke to the sort of the way that you could use a historic structure as a real anchor point for a much larger, broader development, and invite people into this historically underutilized space. So I'm wondering if that's also factored into the conversations thus far.
I'd be happy to address that. Our role in the Denver Union Station project was far greater than what happens with the historic station and the transit infrastructure that's there. We were responsible as master developer for not only the $500 million of public infrastructure improvements and 10 acres of public spaces, but nearly 30 acres of development activity that happened around it that facilitated $3.5 billion of investment in the neighborhood. And that strung together a series of public spaces with the transit, with mixed income housing, with hospitality and retail uses, as well as market rate residential and office, all into one neighborhood. So to your point, Commissioner, about making sure that you have the components that folks who live and work there every day have the things that they need in their neighborhood. We were able to bring a grocery store to the neighborhood, a pharmacy and drugstore to the neighborhood, as well as new employment, mixed-income housing, as well as high-end and market-rate housing. So we were able to bring a variety of things into that neighborhood. I think you have the same opportunities here, and it's quite candidly, what we got excited about as we looked at this site. Not just the physical plan opportunities of what could be developed, but really the ambition that Prosper Portland set forth with the vision and the guiding principles about what you want to achieve with this site. It's a rare opportunity to have 14 acres of publicly owned and controlled land in the heart of your city. Right? That doesn't exist anywhere. It's very rare to have that opportunity. And you've set some pretty ambitious goals around it, which is really, candidly, if this were a privately owned piece of property and we were offered to come in transactionally to do something here, we wouldn't be interested in it. We would have passed. I think what interested us in the site is, a lot of what you set forth in the guiding principles and wanting to do something different and grander and more civic in nature that really keeps Portland at the top of the list when people are looking at forward-thinking urban development. That's why we got excited about it. That's why we're here.
That's great to hear. And touching on Commissioner Marlon-Capulla's earlier comments and questions, again, from your experience thus far in the project, what do you see as being some of those catalytic elements within the, again, just beginning concepts, right, that have the most impact in drawing a diverse user base, if not an actual diverse clientele, to this space so that it truly becomes known or used as much as any of Portland's most popular parks?
Yeah, I actually had a slide later, but we can skip over it. I'll just talk to it from here anyway. So, I think, look, we've now been visiting Portland, spending a lot of time for what is now, I think, nearly 6 months that we've been here. And we've learned a lot in the 6 months we've been here. We've spent, I can't count the number, but it is dozens and dozens of outreach meetings we've done ourselves outside of the stakeholder engagement process, where we have taken the time to go meet with individuals, with organizations, with community-based groups to listen and learn about what their objectives are and what their stories are about why they, what are their interests in this site, what are their concerns about the site, what's shaping those perspectives and opinions about how they feel about the Broadway corridor opportunity that's here. And we've learned a lot in that process. I think as we move forward, things that we are going to be looking at as we dig deeper into each of these concepts, first and foremost, we're a developer. We have to make sure that it is, in fact, financially feasible in what's going to be developed here. And that's that iterative process of looking at the plan, the benefits that are being requested out of the plan, the financial feasibility, and how they all relate to one another. We'll be looking very hard at the flexibility for program development over time, right? I can assure you that other than the physical framework, programmatically, how we're thinking about this is going to change countless times over the market cycles as things move forward. So we need to make sure that the physical framework that's developed provides for that flexibility and allows uses to be interchangeable at various points in time in market cycles. Other things we'll look at is on a phasing basis and the scale of buildings and the individual blocks that we're looking at. The larger the buildings get, it forces a certain capital structure to execute those projects successfully. You're looking at large institutional lenders and investors in those projects. However, if you have opportunities through the physical plan that you create to have smaller bite-sized pieces, you can then offer opportunities to smaller developers, local investors. You can look at creative financing of things where you raise friends and family opportunities with community investment that can go into these buildings. And you can't do those on large institutional scale buildings, but you can do it on something that's a smaller scale footprint. So when I look at the projects that are the concepts that are developed here, The discovery concept, as way of example, has an opportunity to have much smaller scale pieces while still having the opportunity for the larger institutional investments to be made in the neighborhood. So I think we need to look at how we balance those. We're looking hard at the market absorption. And, Portland, from what we've learned, is actually very similar to Denver, where you don't have really large investments in office, for example. The absorption of what you accomplish here are small bite-sized pieces, 125, 150 to maybe 200,000 square foot buildings. There are very few that are kind of 400 to 600,000 square foot buildings. Not to say that those can't be done, but we need to think about how things are phased and, again, making sure we have the flexibility and scalability of the project as we move it forward. Another piece that's important on the phasing is that at any given point of the project, we want to make sure that we have a complete place, right? If we build something that is dependent on enormous upfront infrastructure investment in order to have a there, that's a real challenge. We want to make sure that at every step of the project, at every individual discrete phase, it's a complete place and it feels complete, and that the community can enjoy it and use it the way it's intended, even if it takes multiple phases over time to develop. And then I think probably the most important is at each of those phases that there are very deliberate and intentional objectives that have been set forth with this project for community benefits. And we need to make sure that at each step of the project, we are able to address as many of those as we can. It's not to say that at every phase we can do everything, but we want to make sure that we're able to do as much as we can at each phase of the project so that we are hitting on each of those elements as we go forward. And I think as we get kind of even deeper into it, the other piece that we're going to be spending a lot of time on, and I know there's some slides coming up later, are the sources and uses and how do we make sure that as we refine these concepts and we talk about all the things I've just been discussing, we are balancing the sources and uses so we know we can be successful in whatever we are going to be executing on the site.
Thank you. Those are really helpful points. What I'm taking away from it is very much an appreciation for the fact that this is very much a phased project, and that we should keep in mind the modularity that you've been highlighting, right? The idea that you're going to build pieces that, in and of themselves, have an aspect of completion, right? That the smaller pieces may be, in fact, the ones that can hopefully catalyze the most community interest and maybe even direct investment, and hence a sense of place that comes out of that more so than the larger, more visible structures. So I think that's very valuable for us to understand. Thank you.
Can I ask about one other design piece? I just heard a lot of buzz around the at the open house around the concept of connecting under Broadway to the station and having to what extent has that really been looked at in terms of what it would take to do that? And
So again, this is one of the places where we receive feedback that is very diverse. There is, how do you keep it activated enough to not have it become a place that isn't the kind of activity you're looking for? How do you connect it? How do you make it part of and have it reach out into the other aspects of the site so that it feels like it's a part of it and it's not a sort of a place off to the side? And then again, what a great place, the feedback we would get. For instance, if you got off the bus or the train and, right now there's not a lot for you to do there, but maybe you're waiting for your next connection or whatever. If you have some sort of market there, some sort of other activity that is a generator of 24/7, participation, you could very well have something that could be a real gem. So we're hearing feedback from people across the spectrum for those sorts of things.
If I could add to that, the success of any public space is far more about what happens on the edges of those spaces than what's happening actually in the spaces. You know, Denver Union Station, as an example, when we were selected as the master developer, it had 2 trains a day, one in the morning, one in the evening, which carried very few passengers through the station. It had a single bus stop that ran behind the station off of the high occupancy vehicle lane to drop people off in the morning and pick up in the evening. And the forecourt in front of the station were surface parking lots, right? This was in 2008, right? And 10 years later, and the entire neighborhood is transformed. It is the most popular place in the city to gather. That's in part because of the public plazas we put in front, but it's more in part due to the uses and the activities that we programmed all around the space when we developed all of the land around it. The underside of the bridge, for those who haven't gone and looked at it, particularly the Broadway Bridge, is actually much nicer than the Lovejoy Bridge. But the Broadway Viaduct is a riveted steel structure. It's quite beautiful. And it rises at a point that when you're at Johnson, you can drive directly underneath it. And when you get even further north, you've got 18, 20 feet of clearance underneath there. And I think one of the things that people will be surprised is when the post office building is gone, there's quite a bit of light, air, and transparency underneath the structure, but it doesn't feel like that today because of the scale and the magnitude of the post office structure itself. When that's gone, that opens up tremendously. So I think the real challenge is not, can that space be successful? The answer to that is a simple yes, it can. It's what do we do around it to program it properly, to make sure that we activate it. It's a needed connection east-west to be able to get through and under that bridge structure, but we need to think about how it's programmed and what the uses and buildings are that are going to be built around it and adjacent to it in order to help activate it and really draw people through there.
Other comments? I think this has been a great discussion. I'm really pleased to know that some of our ambitious goals can be achieved because, as Commissioner Moreland-Capuya mentioned kind of early in her comments, it all feels very busy, and we worry, at least I worry a little bit, well, are we asking too much of this defined site? But from your experience, it sounds like at Denver's Union Station and other developments, it's possible to achieve that, so I find that really heartening and, great news. So, fantastic.
Is there any other?
Say that there are market forces that we have to weigh against these desires. And so I guess, it's a decent point. Was that your conclusion, that you believe, I know all things are possible, is it plausible?
I think that there will be a balance for sure. I think there is a lot of what has been outlined in the guiding principles can absolutely be achieved, but there will be some give and take along the way. And are we going to be able to achieve every one of the goals and objectives on every piece of the project? Probably not. But I think in aggregate, when we look at the whole, can we deliver on with the development program and the phasing of things, when it's all said and done, the majority of the goals and objectives have been set forth? I think the answer to that is yes, we can.
You're on the record.
Happy to be.
Is there any other feedback on the development concepts before we move forward?
I'd like to ask just another question about the concepts. So one thing, just from a layman, I'm not an architect or designer, I'm a lawyer, so forgive the dumb question and comment. But when I look at the, at the blocks from an overhead perspective, they look and feel one way. But obviously, when you see renderings with the massing placed on the blocks, you get a whole different sense of what's there. And like your comment, Frank, earlier about the juxtaposition between the area underneath the bridge and the post office building the way it is now, you know, are we in danger of having some of those same feelings once the massing is in place? You know, I mean, I guess we have to be intentional about it and perhaps not build the big building, the biggest building right there, you know. But, you know, I guess one concern that I have is that we're able to manipulate that massing in such a way that we have a nice mixture of smaller buildings with bigger buildings, and it doesn't all feel like there's a giant wedge on top of everybody. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. The you know, that is one thing that I think isn't apparent when you look at these different concepts just in plan view. Mm-hmm. To achieve the same total square footage of development in each of these, you end up with varying scale of building development in each concept. I don't know if we have anything that shows those, but
So you can see in the bottom corner,
you know that
Right.
massing
Right.
for one.
Yep.
So they are all different in how they scale in buildings, and that's back to my comment about the flexibility of program, and in particular the block pattern and street network, so that you can create opportunities for both larger buildings as well as smaller buildings, because again, they're capitalized differently.
Right.
And to the extent that we can keep some smaller scale opportunities, it opens up the opportunity for far more folks to have access to investment and wealth creation within the project, not only from directly investing in or being a development partner in the project or being the developer of it, but to how it's contracted. A small scale contractor can more easily do a smaller building as the lead, as opposed to having to be a sub, or they can be a JV partner in it and take a larger, more significant role. So there's more opportunity to grow capacity in the local communities if you have that variety of scale of projects as we move forward. We just need to make sure we keep that in mind.
With respect to the smaller versus the larger buildings, is there is it more likely that the smaller buildings would be residential, or is it less likely that they would be residential, or does it make any difference? I'm curious.
You know, my view is if we do the physical framework properly, it won't make any difference. Mm-hmm. Right? We're responding to the market dynamics at that particular time as we move that phase forward. So, you know, hopefully we're in a position where, you know, if the market shifts and office is the right product to build, and we're in a cycle that only allows us to do 125,000 square feet, we can do 125,000 square feet. If it's residential and it allows for something bigger, we have an opportunity to do that. So we want to be able to respond with the plan and not be locked into each individual site. Each individual building has to be a certain size, a certain height, a certain program. We want to make sure that the ground floor and the ground plane is equally activated in any scenario of program that goes on top, and that we're able to address parking configuration and so forth on each of these plans, so that we can have flexibility to adapt as necessary going forward.
Okay, thank you.
If you go back to kind of where I talked about the phase we just came from and the phase we're going into, that's exactly the level that we're beginning. We're starting to take a look at these, which are basically just extrusions, and to say, that's how much sun do we want to get down in there? Where do we want shadows to go?
Right.
What should be the front? What should be the back? All of those sorts of things. And as we get into those, it will help to point out the kind of structure, that framework that we describe at the end in the master plan, again, like Frank said, so that you can come back and you can say, you know, this feels like a good fit. And then we've described some of the parameters of what would make a good fit right here.
Great, thank you.
So one more clarifying question from Frank then. In your experience with Union Station, because of the scale of that development, I assume it was also a significantly phased project. Could you give us some examples of how some of the flexibility worked in your favor when you started with, say, smaller portions of that development, completed those, and that informed then the next phase?
Yes. A couple things on Union Station. We have to keep in mind the time that we actually commenced on that project. We were selected as the master developer on that project in October, November of 2006, right? We spent 2.5, 3 years designing, reached a guaranteed maximum price contract on the infrastructure, set up the public financing vehicles, got all the council approvals. It took 13 separate actions at city council to get the approvals necessary to go forward. Locked arms, got ready to go to the bond market, and there was no bond market to go to. The bottom literally fell out. So, we hit that cycle in the worst possible time. We were able to put the pieces back together with a different financing structure that used a federal loan program instead of bond proceeds to ultimately get things moving and executed. We were able to build the infrastructure components during the downturn. But at the same time we were doing that, we had obligations to buy specific parcels at a fixed price, at a fixed point in time, and they were all financially guaranteed. So we had to advance those pieces. Because we had flexibility on scale of development, we were able to start with very small 100,000 square foot buildings instead of 400,000 square foot buildings. We were able to take smaller bite-sized pieces and live up to the obligations we had made to the city, to the transit agency, in order to move the project forward. So we were not only able to do that on a scale of building, but we were also able to do it with use of the buildings, right? We started with office. We did 3 office buildings. We then did a big multifamily project that we sold to another group that executed. We then did a hospitality piece and a smaller office building. We are now, our partners are now doing a for-sale condominium project. So we were able to adjust program and think about the timing of when it was done based on the scale of each of those buildings. So very important to have that kind of flexibility in a project of this nature and this kind of complexity that's going to take multiple market cycles to go through.
Great, thank you.
I want to add, and I know we're going to go to the next phase, but that I think this issue of the density of the site is going to continue to be something that this board and the team will need to wrestle with. South Waterfront is a good example of a place where I think there's at least on the city side, a public perception that we underbuilt because the market wasn't there. And so you have a significant amount of transportation infrastructure that could serve a much higher volume of residents and businesses. And because of the business cycle, which was it also hit the exact wrong time, we underbuilt. So one of the things that we've been thinking about just is that trade-off of, as a public entity, can we hold it until the market is at a time where we don't underbuild the site? And what that means from both a holding cost consideration, but also how dense do we want the site to be? Because a site that's this dense feels very urban, and it doesn't necessarily feel the same as other parts. So I think we're hitting on something, and I know we're going to go into the next area, but observations and direction from the board around this issue of density is going to be really important as we move forward.
Yes, please.
All right, so actually this is, I'm in the very enviable position of being next to last, which allows me to do a little bit of synthesizing and summarizing. What you've heard so far is going to be echoed in my very brief remarks here around anchor recruitment strategy for the quality jobs that we're hoping to attract to the site. Basically, decisions that are going to be made over the next few months are going to impact quite substantially our approach and our strategy around anchor employer recruitment. So those decisions can include things like what are the parcel sizes that are ultimately going to be decided on, what are the floor plates, programmatic priorities, as Frank outlined, what are the amenities and phasing of those amenities, what's the flexibility in uses and timing, et cetera, right? So we are still quite early on. So just to recap, we're looking at the guiding principles call for 3,000 to 4,000 plus jobs on the site, 3,000 to 4,000 of anchor employers. So typically would be trade sector employers within our target clusters. And typically a strategy like that needs to be, you're waiting until you have a master plan, but we still have some things that we can put in place. So just to give you an overview of some of the considerations that we have been looking at, first and foremost, we're still trying to determine, given the market dynamics of Portland, what is the right approach in terms of attracting one major employer versus multiple smaller employers. We're leaning towards a larger employer, but that's still under discussion. We want to make sure that we have some of the recruitment and expansion resources that we have as a city available to companies that are considering the Broadway corridor for location. So that includes the enterprise zone, where we want to make sure that that's available. That'll also to the earlier points around ensuring the revenue generation broadly within the city. The way we administer the enterprise zone program, of course, requires a public benefit agreement with the employers to take advantage of it. So that's a good way to ensure there's some equitable outcomes in the way we attract companies. So what we're doing right now is we're working with a number of partners that are experts in this kind of stuff, including ourselves. Greater Portland Inc., of course, this Business Oregon, the state's economic development agency, and then JLL, who's a consultant with us, and of course has vast experience in brokerage and recruiting large tenants to projects like these. So the next steps really is a refinement of the process by which we are going to be recruiting major employers to the site. We are anticipating that once we have a master plan substantially either complete or at least in progress, where we have some of the answers to some of the questions I just outlined before, then we would actually be able to go out and start calling on employers. This is a nationally significant site, as I think it's obvious to us all, and so that requires a really concerted approach that involves leaders throughout the community, direct calls to some of the major markets in the country, going on the road selling this thing. There's some really interesting things that we're going to be able to do, and that's really what we will start that in earnest about a year from now.
Exciting.
Any questions around that?
You kind of skimmed over the opportunity zones. So I wonder what you might see. I know it's a newly emerging program, but I'm wondering too if there's some opportunities there to create opportunity funds that are established just for local investors that could invest in the project. And I'm just kind of throwing that out, but what do you see in terms of happening with that program that could?
So we're still awaiting guidance from the federal government. I think it's in the process of being issued very shortly. The site is within an opportunity zone, so it's eligible for opportunity fund investment. There's a number of ways you can get there, whether you do it by a local fund or whether the developer or investors are utilizing opportunity zones. But the good news in this case is that that the site is within an opportunity zone, so investors that are building within the corridor will be able to potentially take advantage of that as a way to make the financials work.
Other comments? No? Okay. Great. Thanks.
Excuse me. Well, my colleagues have been talking about the future, and I live very much in the present. So I'm going to talk to you about the site that we currently have, which is the post office. We're in a hurry to realize the future, but one step at a time. So right now, we have the postal facility. The distribution section of the building and all of that operations has transitioned over to their new facility, and they anticipate that they will vacate the site by the end of the year. And that leaves the retail facility. So as you can imagine, my highest priority right now is to focus on how to relocate the retail portion of the facility. In the interim, though, we have other priorities. So adhering to the development timetable is paramount, and to relocate the facility, the USPS retail, is in alignment with that. In addition, we have a very large facility and a very large open space around that, so security is paramount. Oops, sorry. Maximizing our available resources for community benefit, but also employing best practices in asset management and activating the site in a manner that is collaborative and community-focused. So this is the program for the USPS retail. And in order to relocate their facility, we need to identify a site at which we can accommodate this program. So you can see that it has geographic boundaries and it has capacity in terms of who they're serving in this site. We've contracted with Jones Lang LaSalle to identify prospective sites for the relocation, and we should be receiving their final report very soon, hopefully next week. In the meantime, we have to keep in mind that per our purchase and sale agreement, they have the right to remain in place. So I will be talking a bit about demolition, but just so you know, we have looked into options that would include a partial demolition to preserve them in place, and we have decided that we want to prioritize their relocation because of the prohibitive cost of a partial demolition. Oops, no, that's not. The demolition timeline you can see from the slide here. It is assuming that the relocation will be complete as of October of 2020, but obviously sooner is better. The priority for demolition, as with all of our contracting, is to provide opportunity for disadvantaged firms to bid on and hopefully receive the contract for demolition. So we're working with our partners, with colleagues, to identify ahead of time ways to make sure that our RFP reaches the widest possible audience and to ensure that there is opportunities for participation at every stage. So with regard to interim use, I've made reference to cost, and as you can imagine, the facility has a significant holding cost associated with it. We have identified many different scenarios, possible scenarios for interim use, and based on the cost considerations, we've identified a plan that we're pursuing that will allow us to be fiscally prudent, but also keep as much of the facility available for interim use. So we are in conversation with the Joint Office of Homeless Services for them to explore the use of the vehicle maintenance facility. You can see that is the pink shaded building at the top of the graph. That would be a facility that could prospectively hold upwards of 100 beds for a warming shelter. We will find out very soon the results of air quality tests in that facility to ensure that the safety of the prospective residents is preserved. Also, you can see on the picture a significant amount of surface space, and what we would hope for is to be able to make that surface area available for events, and that, as Sarah mentioned, the public parking option would be something that we definitely want to explore, and we're in conversation with PBOT around how we can make that available for public use. And the issues we want to hear from you about, additional information that we should consider as we go through the contracting process for demolition, and key opportunities or issues that you foresee arising.
Well, I have a quick question about, can we go back to the shelter idea?
Yes.
So at one point, we did a little tour of the building, and we were thinking, I think, of doing a shelter in the more of the main building, and now we've moved over to the vehicle maintenance building.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain a little bit about that? Is there, I mean, I guess it's probably, maybe it's better to be over there and not try to take a piece of the larger building? Is that the idea?
There were a few considerations, one of which being cost, another logistical, and by logistical we mean just egress, ingress, as well as the interface with the retail portion of the post office. Cost is
partially due to the structure of the building. It's very porous. We would have to ensure, per the federal guidelines for the USPS, that there is no possibility of entry and exit through any part of the existing postal facility. There are also other cost considerations around getting that area of the building in a correct shape to house individuals, because it is now an office, and so there would be some tenant improvements involved. And then in discussions with the joint office, they seemed to feel that the vehicle maintenance facility would also be appropriate, especially considering that they could also add modular structures around it if they wanted to increase capacity, and also if they wanted to provide people the opportunity to park at or near the site in terms of like mobile like RVs and that sort of thing.
Thank you. Comments? Questions?
In terms of key opportunities for developing on that site once it's demolished, I just want to bring up again the idea of trying to secure contractors of color locally to participate in that endeavor. I just really want to bring us back to that's been a kind of a consistent desire of mine, and I think that that's a key opportunity that I'd like us to really hone in on.
Absolutely.
I have a more general question on the planning. So the official master plan is going to just be on the USPS site, but is your master plan with lowercase m and p also looking at the full parcel? Also, the part that goes under Broadway Bridge and Union Station and all of that? You guys?
Yes, we intentionally included a study area that was broader than what we were required to do by code, in part because we had other parcels that we wanted to understand of our distribution strategy and the priorities for those, such as Block R, and then the interface with Union Station. So separate from this project, we do have the federally funded preliminary due diligence and planning effort for our Union Station. And so that project has gone so far as to kind of look at the shell and where the transportation functions might be consolidated within Union Station, but then how does that create additional kind of tenanting and ground floor activation opportunities that then could interface with the development to kind of better knit those together? How does it help with the edges and activating under the bridge area? So those two projects are kind of working together.
So the development planning area, just to emphasize what Sarah's stating, includes Greyhound. It includes One Waterfront as well. I think we have an interest in really visualizing what the context is and understanding that there's already there are some areas that are built out, but understanding what Block R should be, understanding what we want to happen at One Waterfront, understanding what we want to see around Union Station are just as important. We will have more flexibility because it won't be within an official master plan, but I think as we look at the parcels and as we look at how we dispose of them, as Sarah mentioned, we'll want to bring to the board a full concept within each of those sites.
And what's the timing for the master plan? When do we expect that to be sorted out?
Segue, if I can have the clicker. Before I move into schedules, are there any other comments on the demolition and interim use?
I actually wanted to know, is there a timeline for the warming shelter?
The Joint House is waiting for the air quality results, and once we have those, then we'll move toward creating a timeline for that.
Just before, I guess since October 2020 is what we have scheduled for the demolition. If there's an opportunity for interim use on the post office for transitional services, if the timing works with the building of the warming shelter, and maybe some sort of job. I mean, it would be really short-termed, obviously, but if there's opportunity, maybe we can explore that a little bit.
Absolutely.
I think working with Project for Public Spaces too, they're very keen on how do we test a lot of the priorities that we've been hearing from the community, and so how do we have kind of lighter, quicker improvements that could happen, and so we can kind of test are these concepts really working and reflecting what we've been hearing in the feedback. So I would certainly include that. In terms of our overall schedule and next steps, then, we are, as we mentioned, we are moving out of our early concept alternatives development into refining concepts. And then at the beginning of the year, after selecting kind of a preferred configuration, we will move into about 4 months of detailing that concept in further detail. We anticipate entering into our land use review process just for the master plan itself, so that'll be kind of pulling out subcomponents of the development strategy to take to design commission next summer, late spring, early summer. Leading up to that time, we are having our pre-application conference, our design advice requests later this year and early next to kind of lead up into that formal land use review process for the master plan itself. And then along the way, looking at how are we informing our work with the priorities around a community benefits agreement, so not moving into the actual negotiation of that agreement, but ensuring that we are not precluding aspects that we think will be included there through our decisions around development planning. Again, because I think we can't show this image enough through this project, we are kind of moving from the public benefits and the vision and programming, and then in our next phase of concept refinements, we'll also be taking kind of our first high-level look at the financial feasibility of the different concepts. So to close today, I wanted to share kind of what we have in terms of our known sources and uses. These numbers will be updated in the near future to reflect the actual concepts. So right now, this is informed by the 2015 development program mix, a level of infrastructure investment, moving forward. And so this includes kind of where we have identified kind of committed or known resources. So for the acquisition of the post office property itself, those funds have been spent by us and Prosper Portland, or by us and the Portland Housing Bureau. We are underway with our development planning efforts. So we have approximately $4 million included in the River District urban renewal area to cover those expenses, our community engagement, and other consultants who are advising us on this work. As Amy mentioned, there are significant holding costs with site prep and the retail relocation. We've estimated those at about $28 million. That assumes that there is kind of a 2-year time horizon for kind of interim holding period before demolition occurs. And that would also be funded by TIF we have in the River District urban renewal area. Based, again, on the framework plan configuration, we had an estimate of $37 million of investment in parks and streets and utilities. That included kind of environmental remediation in terms of hotspot remediation, as well as the remediation with the parks and streets. We assumed that the development pads themselves, that cost would be carried by the developer, and when we calculated our land value, we would take that into consideration. For the infrastructure investment, the Bureau of Transportation has committed $5 million in system development charge credits. That was in exchange for an investment that we made in their infrastructure in the Oregon Convention Center urban renewal area. And then we have approximately $5 million that will be remaining in TIF availability in the River District budget. The affordable housing, the Portland Housing Bureau has approximately $5.5 million that remained from the TIF set aside and, from the River District. They used the bulk of it for the acquisition, but they do have those funds remaining and earmarked for this project. And they are looking to identify other proceeds, whether it's from construction excise tax or future housing bonds that could be available for this project. In terms of community benefits that don't show up, whether it's in the open space or infrastructure or affordable housing, so these might be programmatic opportunities, offsite investments, and other forms of community benefits could be included in the site. We do not yet have an estimate, as we're still kind of working to understand what that package might look like. But we're assuming that the bulk of the funding for those could come from the land transaction itself, from the residual land value. Those funds would not be kind of TIF restricted, so we would have greater flexibility of both where we could place those and what types of benefits that we could fund using those values, whereas TIF, we have restrictions there. And then we have other parcels, as we were just discussing, in the River District and specifically in the Broadway corridor. We do know from our work around Union Station there's a significant need for investment there, as well as the other parcels in the study area, and so understanding what investment might need to be required there. As you can see in the shaded boxes in the lower right of the table, those are kind of areas where we have a known gap, and we are working with our other Bureau partners to understand how, as a city, we might kind of collectively put together a comprehensive investment strategy that would help deliver on the place that we would like to see here. Any questions on that? Or So in closing, we wanted to get any other further insights around kind of what are our highest priorities to deliver on this project. We have talked about there are a lot of very kind of broad aspirational things that will need to be trade-offs. We'll need to look at financial feasibility. So we're looking for your advisement of what we kind of prioritize as we look to do that.
Comments? No? Well, they're all high priorities. I know that's cheating. I shouldn't say that. But no, I think that, you know, your mix right there is those have been our standards and our goals. And I don't think they have really changed. I think we all, I mean, my sense is that we all pretty much feel the same way that we did at the outset of the project. We'd like to see all those things achieved. We know that there'll be some balancing, there'll be some trade-offs, as we've discussed. There'll be, you know, financial issues here and there, but hopefully, on the whole, we'll hopefully be able to achieve those goals. So.
I think I've made mine known, so I don't, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We have a pointer right there.
Yep.
And if we were to do kind of a drawing, and that would be the center, and all those other things would sort of feed into it.
I like it. Other comments? Commissioner Platt? Are you with us?
No. Yeah, yes, no additional comments.
Okay. All right.
That concludes our presentation. If there's any other questions or.
Great.
I have a quick comment. Thank you for both yours and Myers and Amy's team for all of your hard work, and thank you for staying with this, and look forward to an exciting project working with you guys.
Thank you to you as well, Commissioner Myers. You've played an important role in being a co-chair of our steering committee and your engagement in the project moving forward, too. So thank you for
With
that.
Zeke gone, I think I'm the chair, aren't I?
True.
Which is sad. I wish Zeke wasn't gone.
This has been a great presentation. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Super.
Really, a lot of great information. I guess the one thing I just wanted to highlight for me, Frank, I really appreciate your perspective on basically everything you said. I thought was just spot on. And the one thing that's really resonating with me is, and that I'm really appreciating, is that you're approaching this and encouraging a master planning effort that's going to create opportunities for local investment, which was something I was worried about. I kind of came onto this board right when the RFP was getting issued, and I guess that was sort of my big concern, was that we're going to get this outside developer coming in, and and it's going to be big institutional type of development, and there's not going to be this keen eye on how to do this in a way that supports the local economy and local development and minority. And I think I think the partnership here just sounds like we obviously picked right. With regards to having an alignment there in a lot of your principles. So I really appreciate that. I think that's exciting.
I guess one issue I would flag, which is just a little bit off topic, but the master planning process itself, I think we need to really kind of bear down on that. And I'd like to, maybe this is more of a question for our legal department, but I'd like to be very careful about how we approach that. I've had personal experience with another large development in another part of the city in which the master plan and some of the intent of the master plan didn't really get borne out the way that folks thought it would. And there was some community disappointment about that. And there were structural reasons for that, and some logistical reasons, and things that had to do with the phasing of the development and the way parcels were sold, and so forth, that all affected that. But I want to be really careful to make sure that the intent of our master plan is respected and actually works the way we think it will. So.
We are having a work session towards the end of this month with Continuum, our design team, and legal expertise to help kind of think through that strategy and how how we approach that work. We are also being mindful that this is a very new set of code requirements, and so we are keeping an eye on 2 other projects that are also going through the master plan at about the same time, and seeing where we can learn from each other and working closely with city staff to navigate
Great,
that process.
thank you. All right, well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's a great program. All right, today's meeting of the Prosper Portland Board of Commissioners is now adjourned. Thank you.